Hi, and welcome to What's Important to You with me, James Dean. On the show, I will be talking to people from all walks of life and asking them the question, what's important to you? Because I believe once we understand what's important, then we can build the life that we truly want to live. I hope you are inspired by the guests that I talk to and answer that question for yourself and build the life that you truly want. You can support the show by clicking on the subscribe button, sharing your favorite episode, or leaving your comments. Thanks for watching. Today's guest is the author of Life is a Cycle, a true story of resilience, solo travel, and cycling adventures. She is a travel writer, the solo travel expert on Today FM, a bespoke travel consultant, and hosts guided beach yoga breaks in Europe. She is a keynote speaker on resilience, well-being, and mental health, and is a health and wellness, addiction, and mental health coach who adores working with anyone who is determined to change their behaviour and mindset. She is also 50 years old, single, and a cat lady. Today, we find out what's important to Sinead Kennedy. Hi, Sinead. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks a million. You're very welcome for having me, James.
Yeah, delighted you're here. Really looking forward to this. So we're going to dive straight in, Sinead, with the first question, which is always, Sinead, what's important to you?
So the biggest thing that is important to me is actually my relationship with myself. So I guess self-love is really has become a huge issue. Not an issue, that's the wrong word. Is a huge thing for me, particularly over the last 20 years.
Interesting, because I've heard people say before, they've said either be themselves or love, but never the two, in a sense of self-love has been the most important thing. And obviously, as you say, a big thing for you, and a 20-year sort of discovery or journey is quite a big thing. So tell me a little bit more why it's so important.
So, I've been very open about my past history. And in 2005, I did end up in St. Pat's psychiatric unit. And it was basically because I was so unhappy and so, miserable in myself. And, and I've written a book, and that's where the book starts in 2005. So I really was, in hindsight, a very unhappy girl, like very, even when I was a kid, I never felt right in myself. I never felt like I fitted in. I always felt like the odd one out. And to be honest with you, I basically spent the first 32 years of my life trying not to be me. And I really was going around faking it, for want of a better word, and really trying to fit into society's expectations, particularly of a young woman in her 30s, in her prime, supposed to be going out finding the husband, having the children. And but I just, nothing I did was ever a success. Everything I touched was a disaster, including myself. And then it all just came to a head. And that, like in September 2005, I just decided I had enough, and I thought the only way forward was to end my life. And then, when I ended up in the psychiatric unit, I just got such a fright. I really did, and it really gave me the jolt that I needed to sit up and wake up and to say, you know what, something has got to change, because what you've been doing for the last 32 years has not worked. So you got to change the record. So that's basically when I feel my life started, was 2005.
Wow.
So basically, the guts of 20 years now.
Yeah, absolutely. No, for some people who might obviously know your story better than others, I'm not as familiar. So I could thank you for sharing. Obviously, you've shared it many times, but thank you for sharing that again with ourselves today. It's quite a sort of, because obviously it's 20 years now since that sort of, you say, since 2005, when you really got to that point. Was there I'm sure it's taken time over those years, but was there anything, would you say, specific, barring the sort of obviously the the attempt to take your own life, that was kind of like when you said, "Oh, I had decided I had to change"? Is there something you say, like, what was it that you were doing? You said you weren't being yourself, or you're doing. What was it you weren't doing that you now know in hindsight that you now do?
Yeah, in hindsight, I wasn't accepting of myself or acknowledging myself. I kind of deep down always knew I was different, or felt different, and I
Mm,
never accepted that, my uniqueness. And I
yeah.
thought, again, society pressures or pressures I was putting on myself, but I really did want to fit in, and I didn't want to be the odd one out, as in, I wanted to be the same as everybody else and buy a
Mm,
house and get married and have children. But it eluded me, all of that, because the thing was, whenever I met guys, I was always trying to be something that I wasn't, and then of course I'd slip up, or my mask would fall off basically, and I would show my true colors. So basically I just was going around being an actress for a
yeah.
very long time, imposter syndrome or whatever you want to call it. And it was really only when I decided that, I've got to accept the fact that I am different, that I am a different kind of person. I'm not, I'm just, I am different. And it was only then that I kind of said, right, well, I'm very creative, I'm very artistic, I'm a bit, out there, for want of a better word. And, I do like alternative things, and I'm not really a mainstream thinker. I do think a lot outside the box, and, I would question things, and I would read stuff that's maybe a bit, people would say conspiracy theories or whatever, but I'm just curious. I'm like, well, I just want to
Mm,
get both sides of the story. Um, so I do think very differently. And it was that I was always trying to hide. I'm just quite, yeah, I don't know. I mean, years ago they probably would have called you eccentric or something, but
yeah.
I do know for a fact I think very differently to a lot of people.
Sure.
And
And
it was that I didn't want to show, because to
yeah.
fit in.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting in a sense, like, because you said it a few times there, but it's that thing of, I'd say now as well, that the almost the going against the grain of what, as you say, in theory, society would predetermine in sense of what people would do around that age, and the sort of arguably wanting to fit in, but then knowing you don't quite. And I suppose then once you, because we all have, I think the difference that maybe you're thinking, we all have that little bit of difference, and I think it's sometimes it's maybe more on a, on a spectrum, so people have it more than others. But when you actually, this is the question, when you actually embraced that difference and really kind of just lent into it, what was the impact on yourself?
Oh, well, basically, I ended up changing my job, my career, my friends, like everything.
Mm,
I had always wanted to travel, and I had always wanted to work on the cruise ships, and that's what I did. I just packed my bags and I left, and I said, I'm not doing this. I just need time out, and I'm going to go off and travel and do my wanderlust. And that's what I did. And then, again, I was always very sporty, so got a lot more into sport. And fitness. And you know what? I had always wanted to work for myself as well. And I was actually working. I had sort of slipped into a career that again was never meant for me, but it just kind of, you just go in, you get promoted
mm,
and promoted again. And you're like, oh sure, you're just going through the motions. And I was like, oh, to hell with that. I am not doing that anymore. So that all went. So, when I started in a career that I liked, that I enjoyed, when I was traveling, when I was really just doing all of the things I had always wanted to do. Sure, I just was shining, I just was a brand new
mm,
penny. And actually in the book I've used the analogy that I was a caterpillar, and I was down on the ground and I was crawling along my belly. And then when I accepted myself and my uniqueness, that I kind of blossomed and flew off and became this colorful person. So in
mm.
hindsight, I was clipping my wings to please other people.
Yeah.
Um, and then when I decided to hell with that and spread my wings, life just changed and got so much better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd be interested in when you sort of became, or as you say, it's a great analogy in that sort of like from the caterpillar to the butterfly, and that sort of, and really then being who you wanted to be. Did you, I'd be interested to find out then the people, because you said you changed almost jobs, careers, friendship groups, people around you, things like that. When you were then that person or the who you wanted to be, what was then that impact of the people around you? Because if one of those things is thinking, oh, I've got to please people or fit in and stuff, when you actually were then who you really wanted to be, what was then the impact on the other people around you?
Well, frivolous friends fell away. The ones who were just using you. They just suddenly like, oh,
Mm,
she's finally copped on. Well, we better skedaddle and find somebody else. Like people like that are always going to fall off the
yep.
wagon. But yeah, family. For instance, obviously they're not going to skedaddle on you, but they obviously were. I was easier to deal with because I was always quite like you're always bad tempered when you're miserable. Like when you're miserable, you're
Mm,
irritable, and I look back and I really was my 20s and my early 30s. I was just cranky, and demonic almost, and people would say, oh, here she comes again, and when you think about it, people, if there is somebody like that in your life, perhaps you should say, like, what's eating you? Like, what's going on back there? What is it that has you so aggressive or angry with the world, instead of just accepting that behavior? And I really do wish people had perhaps said to me, like what's wrong? But it wasn't discussed
mm,
back then either. So,
yeah.
it's just like,
Yeah.
oh, she's just cranky, leave her off. Like,
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it is that thing of like, because it is that question of like the most sort of basic questions of how are you, what's wrong, what's going on. It seems so simple, but it can be, and you've experienced it to that level. It's like it's the most can be the most cutting question, because it's the question you really need to ask yourself, in a sense, like when you got to that sort of lowest point, because
yeah.
it's a great one to deflect. I'm grand, should not have bother. We can all say these sorts of like throwaway things of how we're actually feeling, but when you actually get down deep enough, that's when you really can make those changes, when you really discover how are you and how you're coping or doing.
Yeah. And I think the other thing as well is that if somebody does answer a question, if you ask somebody, hey, how's it going? And they go, ah, sure, yourself. Like, I would say that, like, that's not an answer. You really need to dig
Yeah.
deeper, because the trouble is most people go, oh, that's great. They haven't told me their problems. Let's all keep here at surface level and
Mm.
let's not
Yep.
go anywhere else. And I remember years ago I broke up with a boyfriend and I was devastated. And if quite a while had gone by and I bumped into somebody who I considered to be quite close to, and I said, I haven't heard from you. They were like, yeah. And I said, like, we broke up, and they went, yeah, I didn't like to disturb you. And I was like, no, you didn't want to deal with it. Like,
Yeah.
there, and it's like,
Yeah.
no, no, guys, this is why society is the way it is. No, come on, you can do better. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, I'd like to then go. I'm going to take us back now when you said about the whole thing of in 2005 and that point again, and you mentioned it a couple of times about then the book that you wrote, and obviously what it. So I just love you to, for the people who haven't heard of it or don't know about it, tell me more about the book.
Yeah, sure. So my book is called Life is a Cycle, and it starts in 2005. Like I've said, just me going, oh dear God, I've got myself into some mess. I need to sort this out. And then I go off, and basically, like that, the book is basically about me growing, unknowingly at times as well, because we kind of, unbeknownst, you're kind of absorbing what you're surrounding yourself with. And I was starting to surround myself with much more positive people. I was doing courses, so I was again learning things, and they were subconsciously, it was like a sponge. I was absorbing things, and then I would realize I knew new things. So basically, I decided to change my career, and one of the things I'd always wanted to do was be a fitness instructor. And I
Mm.
actually had grown up with Jane Fonda, and I adored her. She was a big influence on me. So I went back and I became a fitness instructor, and I ended up on the cruise ships being the fitness instructor. and sailing around the seas, having the time of my life. Like, it was just incredible. I was on a world cruise, and I was here, there, and everywhere. I was in Brunei one day, you know. And then obviously I came back to Ireland, and I had to face the music. And I do talk about, you know, the shame and, you know, the embarrassment, you know, that people knew what I had done. And while I had removed myself, gone away, found myself, you know, very sort of eat, pray, love style, I still had to come home, and people people were relating to the old Sinead, not the new Sinead, you know. So I had to sort of
Yeah.
educate people. No, this is actually how I want to be treated now. You know, I'm not that doormat anymore. You know, I'm not that people pleaser anymore. And then I went off, yeah, and went off to India and did my yoga teacher training. And, you know, I was in an ashram, and, you know, there's a whole chapter on that because it's really quite funny. I sort of struggled in the ashram. It was a bit too hippy dippy for me at the time. And my ego, you know, was fighting, and, you know, I was like, oh, this is a load of rubbish. And then the other part of me was like, no, you need this. No, it's rubbish. No, you need this.
Yeah.
So, you know, and then I came back to Ireland again, and to set up my business and to settle down. But I made a big promise with myself that I would not live an ordinary life. I would never work for anybody ever again. And I made one promise to myself, which I still keep. That is that I travel somewhere amazing every year, and I go for 3 or 4 weeks. So
Cool.
I have an annual trip of a lifetime, and I
Yeah.
go every December. I refuse to do Christmas. I refuse to do Easter, and I go somewhere incredible. So there's loads of chapters in the book, all solo traveling, all about, you know, looking after yourself. Again, a lot of very funny mishaps along the way. Lovely, funny people that I met, lovely adventures. But cycling became more and more important to me. And then when I started cycling to a higher level, I started going to Europe, and doing really crazy cycling events. So they're all in the book. And the good thing is, you don't need to be a cyclist to enjoy the book, because it's about the resilience, the journey, you know, the snot, the tears, you know,
Yeah.
the inner fight, you know, I'll quit. No, I won't, keep going, you know.
Yeah.
So basically, the last 20 years, um, a personal journey, personal growth. But it's a story that everybody can relate to, because I've been very, very honest in the book about ups, downs, my weight, my feelings about myself. And my self worth before 2005 was in the toilet. I didn't even like looking in the mirror at myself. I thought I was horrible. I thought I was ugly. I thought I was fat. I just thought I was grotesque. And then obviously learning to like myself, becoming my own best friend through solo travel. And now I just absolutely adore, like, my solo travel trips are just the best trips ever. Like, I have the best time ever. And everybody says, but how do you do it? You know? Because I can rely on myself, and I never let myself down. That's how. I'm always there for myself. You know, I don't have
Yeah.
to depend on anybody. And if somebody, I'm single and childless, but if somebody comes into my life, they're going to have to be worth it. I'm not giving up where I am for any old Egypt. Like, not going to happen.
Wow, that's thank you so much. I mean, it's so much in it, and what you just shared there, and so many things that we'll go on a little bit more. It's like, but even like the very first thing that I take from that though is what you said about that I'm taking from it is the absolute willingness and commitment to I'm just gonna just give this a damn good go. It's like, I don't, you know what I mean? It's like that. So many people are sort of have that sort of blocker on themselves, you know, to not do something that they're either interested in or want to do. So the fact that you say you had that, you know, as whatever, I don't know if cheesy is the word, of sort of like Jane Fonda or whatever, like when you were growing up and thinking, oh, that's the sort of thing, and that was your inspiration to take up fitness. I think is fantastic. And then the sort of to combine that with the sort of travel piece and to go onto the cruise ship, you know, to go from, again, there's all these sort of highs and lows, but I'm really interested in that point when you did decide to do that and go on that cruise ship, and just, it must have been a world away from where you were just before that, in a sense of like the lowest point, to then throw, you know what, I'm doing this and gone. What was that sort of first piece like of being on that cruise ship and that first trip?
So, when I got out of St. Pat's, and I decided, right, I'm going on the cruise ships, and I applied.
Mm,
And the interview, actually, they came to Dublin, and when I was a child, and this is a really important point for everybody, when I was a child, think back to what you absolutely loved when you were a kid. And I loved, when I was a kid, reading atlases, because we didn't have the internet. I loved our encyclopedias that we have. And every Sunday, my mum and dad got the Sunday World. And at the back of the Sunday World, there was an advert for cruise ships. Every Sunday, I used to sit and
wow.
stare at that advert, and I just used to go off and dream. And I'd forgotten those dreams along the way. And then when I was down in the dumps, I said, you know what? I am going on that cruise ship. That's it. So anyway, long story short, applied. But then it took 10 months. I had to go to
Wow.
London for my training. And when I was in London, you're there training and all the rest. And then one day, the guy who posts you as such came in, and he said, Sinead Kennedy, need an envelope. And I said, oh, here I am. And he handed me an envelope, and he winked, and he said, you're going to love this ship. And I went, oh, okay. And when I opened the envelope, there was a flight to Singapore in it. So
Wow.
I flew to Singapore and arrived at the cruise ship, and it was just this beautiful, beautiful, gorgeous, very upmarket, quite small cruise ship, but hugely upmarket, like 6 stars, and very, very expensive. And walking up the gangplank, with my little suitcase, and I was so nervous but so excited. And the funny thing is, I was going on board as the fitness instructor, but I had actually only just qualified. I had never actually taught a class. So, I mean, I had in school, but I
Yeah.
never actually taught a class to real people, So, it was taken on board, and, it was really funny, and all the officers were there looking very dapper in their beautiful officer and a gentleman outfits. And then I was brought down to the crew area. My cards were stamped, my passport, and blah, 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 blah. And then they said, right, you better go and get changed. And I went, why? And they said, because you've got a class in half an hour. And I was like, oh my God. So the next thing, I was up in the gym with people on front of me, and I was there going, okay, let's do some sit-ups, So, but I did it for a year, and it was just, I had the time of my life. I honestly, I was the world's worst aerobics teacher, but the passengers were only on board for like 2 weeks at a time. So I just had this one routine that did me for for the entire year, because that's all I needed.
Yeah. I love it.
Jane
But
would be horrified.
yeah, no, but I love that, in the sense that it just you put yourself into a position where it was kind of sink or swim, especially on the metaphor of the boat type thing. It's like, where it's like, well, you had no time to worry about it. You had no time to kind of freak out. It's like, you're there, you're in Singapore. What else are you going to do? You're going to have to teach these people that are in front of you, and make the most of it.
And that's it. And, in hindsight, I had been an actress for 32 years. So, as long as you stand up in front of a class and act confident, and tell people what to do, they'll do it. It is Simon Says, as long as you have an air of authority about you. So I was there going,
Yeah.
oh, right, okay, 10 sit-ups. And then I was like, I do 10 more, I was just like, literally, okay, a few star jumps.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it.
But look,
So
you learn on the job, and you get on with it.
yeah,
And, and that's what life is all about. We're all learning on.
yeah, yeah, 100%. But it's. I think that the sort of, again, that the too much what I'm taking from that story, though, is just the sort of the women of adventure. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like, what? Well, hey, what? Just, you say that did that sort of then. Because you talk about the sort of seeing the cruise ships in the paper, or seeing that advert for the cruise ships, and reading encyclopedias, atlases, and things like that, or when you were younger. Was that the first? Had you been sort of traveling before as a kid or growing up, or was that the real first big trip that you kind of did that on the cruise?
No, I was very, very lucky. My father took us abroad at a very young age, and we were really lucky, because, like, back in the 1970s, nobody was going on airplanes, and we did. And then when I was 18, I actually went to college in the UK, and then I dropped out, and then I decided to go off backpacking around Southeast Asia and Australia. So I had done some of that.
Yeah.
But then I had sort of come back, and you just get caught up in the rat race. You get on this treadmill, and it's just and I wasn't doing the sort of traveling that I wanted to do. I wasn't seeing the world the way I wanted to. I was kind of going, look, there's nothing wrong with going to the Canaries. I've been there many times since as well. It's great. But, you're kind of just, it's all very
Yeah.
sedate,
Yeah.
And I wanted to go, on safaris, and I go here, there, everywhere, yeah.
Yeah. There's definitely, I think there's a distinction between a holiday and traveling. Do you know what I mean? So, because there's that sort of almost like prearranged, sort of very nice, whether it be more organized and stuff. Because it reminded me, because it would have been my 2005. Myself and my now wife, we graduated the year before from university, 2004, and in the January 05, we decided we'd just go do a trip together. We did our own sort of mini round the world trip. The first bit we did is we neither of us could drive at the time, so we started in the States. And when I tell people, anyone in the Americans, I tell them this, they couldn't believe it. It's like we did the Greyhound all the way across the States, the bus, the Greyhound. So we went from New York all the way across to San Francisco in a month using the Greyhound. If I tell any Americans that, they're just horrified. You're looking at me because it's just it was an amazing, the things obviously you see. So I share that sort of your interest and passion, or sort of like for that. I like a holiday. I do like that nice side of stuff as well. But it's the seeing the other side, the sort of the cliche of the road less traveled, is really an interesting place to do. And it's something obviously that you've continued, because we'll jump forward. I'm going to jump back and forth. What's coming into my head? These solo trips that you still do now. What's the sort of, like, as you say, it's like you still give that yourself that promise that you do something every year. Tell me a few, why, and then a few of the things you've done.
Well, actually, this Christmas just gone, 2023, I went to Costa Rica and Panama, and that was really a lovely trip. And got to see the sloths, and lots and lots of. It was very naturey, very outdoorsy. The year before that, I went to Thailand and Laos, actually, and again, like, I always go somewhere hot, exotic. I absolutely adore Southeast Asia, and I love South America. So I kind of go this side, that side, this side, that side. Now, obviously, during the pandemic, I ran into a real problem because I couldn't travel. But you know what, I did get to Gran Canaria, and actually I had a great time in Gran Canaria because there's brilliant cycling in Gran Canaria. And then in 2021, I really was on a downward spiral, and I was very aware that I was struggling, and I could, recognize a lot of old traits coming back in. And I really was worried, but I kind of knew, what, I need to do something here. And I just decided, to hell with this. And I brought my bike to Spain, and I just cycled the length of Spain. And you know what? They kept going on that the airport was closed and all this. It bloody well wasn't. And I went, I was like, oh, good luck. And it was essential travel. Like, I needed to get the hell out of here. And, and that's what I did. So there's a whole chapter in the book about cycling down through Spain, because I literally I had one cycling kit and a dress. That was it. For the month. And but I've been to Cuba, been to Bolivia, Chile, or I've just been to so many great places, and I'm not finished yet. I mean, the list is long as my arm. And then I'm really lucky as well, because like, I absolutely adore being European, and I think we're so lucky. We have so many amazing countries, and Ryanair is just like, I won't have a bad word said about Ryanair, because it gets you off the island. And go cycling in Italy, go cycling in Spain, cycling in France, like Spain, gorgeous. Been to Everest Base Camp. That was brilliant. That was a tough trip, but I really enjoyed it. In Nepal, and that was post. They had the earthquake on the 25th of April, actually, and then I was there for that Christmas. So it was very sad, but they needed the tourists, so they were
Yeah.
delighted, they were
Yeah.
delighted that
Yeah.
people were going back there.
Yeah.
So that was
Yeah.
great to help them save.
Yeah.
Mm.
Absolutely. Yeah. My brother-in-law, he went there a few years
Colombia
ago
was
to the base
another.
camp. Colombia.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Uh, that,
Colombia is a full chapter in the book, actually, because quite a few funny things happened in Colombia, and I'm not going to give away what happened,
yeah.
but something very, very interesting happened. And again, it showed my resilience and my sort of determination and strength of character. And, I think there are probably a lot of the qualities I was really trying to suppress, in my
Mm.
younger days, because, people don't always like somebody who's brave or somebody who's willing to, stick their elbows out and get on with life. Because again, it's, who does she think she is? Oh, she thinks she's
Yeah.
better than us. Um,
Yeah.
but now I'm like, yeah, this is it. I just do what I like.
Yeah.
It's
No,
my money. I'll
absolutely.
spend it how
Because
I like, and
yeah, no, because I think because it's interesting as well because the one side that you've touched on, and we'll get into the cycling a bit more as well, but it's sort of the fitness side of stuff and getting into fitness and um, because there's an element where I experienced a little bit when it was probably good 10 so years ago when I was always into sort of fitness and sport when I was a kid and then kind of drifted away from my 20s. But I got back into it in sort of my 30s. I got into running and into marathon running and into triathlon and things like that. And people have heard this before, said I got into doing Ironman and stuff for a good few years, like the long distance stuff. And there was this really interesting point, and it's kind of similar to the point you touched on there. It's like that I was in this sort of period of change in a sense of one from a fitness side of stuff, then in my own sort of wellness, you could say, and you start to do things differently. You start to change. You start to, everything can kind of have this little knock-on effect. You do things a little bit more, that bit braver, as you say. And I found it interesting the people that would give you the comments and sort of they could be taken as a little bit of a dig or trying to be a messing, but there was an underlying current there of whether it's that thing of like trying to bring you back down, you're getting too big for your boots, those horrible cliche things. So, and I'm sure you're not in there. So I'm wondering, how did you sort of manage when because you're at that moment you're living the life you want to live, and you're doing these things that to you seem quite normal, but to everyone else seems quite either crazy or out there or whatever. How did you know what I mean? How did you manage that part of the sort of the other people's picking, I suppose?
yeah, and because like that, I quit drinking as well and everything. I don't drink anymore. And again, in Ireland, that's like, oh my God, what's wrong with her? Like, I'm very lucky that now I surround myself with really positive people. I did a lot of personal development coaches, and I've done a lot of diplomas and in mental health coaching now and addiction coaching. And I really, really have met amazing people who are all going to lift you up. And but
Mm,
I am in a cycling club, so again, you're going out, in our normal capacity, okay, like, oh, let's all go cycle, 200 kilometers, whatever, yeah, let's all go. And so all those kind of people just fizzled out of my life, I guess.
yeah.
They just don't bother me anymore. And my own family try to get their head around some of the events or the things that I've done. um and they'll sort of say, oh, somebody's son took up cycling and he cycled 20 kilometers yesterday, and you're like, oh, oh, that's great. But they're just trying to like have a conversation with you, so you're kind
Yeah.
of like, you have to go, oh, that's nice, isn't he doing great, isn't that lovely? And then they kind of go, yeah, yeah. And then they might kind of go, You'd cycle a bit more than that, would you?" And I'd be like, yeah, yeah, just, look, you just kind of, I'm not going to rain on anyone else's parade because I don't
No.
want them to rain on mine. um
Yes.
but like I said, I just don't put up with that crap anymore. I think that's the bottom line. You know what? Now people just know not to bother. Like, they used to try and push my buttons and all of that, but I just never rose to the occasion. I would just nod my head and go, all right, yeah,
Mm, yeah.
and
No.
I just, as long as you just don't rise to the Kill them with kindness. That's the phrase I'm looking for. Kill them with kindness, because they're just looking to push your buttons. So just don't let them. You can give out about them later in the car home. Don't get me wrong. I don't know for her. Who does she? Da da da. But not in front of them. No.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think you're right, is that it's interesting when you go through those sort of personal changes, and whatever you make those changes, the things that you're interested in, things you want to do. There are certain, I think that this thing of, as you change, the people around you will change, and it's okay for those people to not be in the contact or in your life anymore. And it's kind of being able to let them go. And it's kind of, because the things that you're doing are going to outweigh whatever previous relationship you had with that person or group of people. Because if they're no longer going to serve you in what you're trying to do, then it's a better thing that everyone just moves on and moves their separate ways.
Yeah. And it's true, because friends of mine have gone off and had kids, and there just is no room in their life for a single friend anymore, and you sort of get slowly, the phone calls become less and less frequent, and you just get phased out, and it's there's no harm in it. They're just at a different life stage, and it's the same. My motivation is different to theirs, your frequency, your vibration, whatever you want to call it. So they're just not going to you're just not going to vibe together anymore, and that's it.
Yeah. So tell me now, because obviously the cycling, obviously, it's a huge part of you now. So how did you first get into cycling?
So, we lived up the back of the Dublin mountains, and I always had a bike. We always had bikes, and I was always up and down the road, and it was my first taste of freedom. It was my first time, solo traveling, I was on my bike up and down to the shop, so it gave me huge independence, and I loved the freedom that it gave me. But even when I lived in the UK for a while, and even when I was traveling, I'd always be hiring bikes or things like that. So, I always was drawn to bikes. And then when I came back to Ireland properly and sort of, decided, right, this is where I'm going to base myself. I was talking to somebody one day. Actually, I was teaching him Pilates, and he said, "Oh, there's a cycling club. Do you like bikes?" Because I was sort of saying to him that, I was finding it difficult to make friends because I'd been away, and I was kind of trying to change my life. And he said, join the cycling club. They have a great women's section, and you can start with the women and see how you get on. And I said, "God, that'd be great." So in 2010, I joined the cycling club, and to this day, I'm still in the cycling club. And I joined it for the social element. It was really, I needed it social element and then the cycling, but it's just brilliant. And I have amazing friends through the cycling club, and we would all do anything for each other. We can ring each other, and I'm not just talking about bike parts, but sometimes you might say, "Oh, has anyone I need a lend of this, has anyone got one?" Yes. And I had an accident during COVID. I snapped my Achilles, but like that, they still came and met me for coffee and took me out. It was it was all just part, because they're all good people. They're all fit, they're all healthy, and I think the great thing is we all know that if somebody is injured, they still need to be brought out. And they you're not going to leave them at home rotting.
Yeah, but it's
but
and again,
and then
it's
actually I've made cycling a very part of my business. Sorry.
Okay, no, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, so actually then because I teach yoga and I cycle at a very high level, and I was looking for a cycling and yoga holiday in Europe, and I couldn't find one. So then I decided, oh, sure, I'll just create one then. So I had seen these ads on Facebook for a cycling company in Spain, but it was actually being run by an Irish guy. So I thought, oh, that would be good because I can ring him and talk English. So I just picked up the phone one day to him and I said, "You don't know me, but this is what I'm proposing. What do you reckon? We'll collaborate once a year. I'll bring the customers." And so we've been doing that now for 10 years. And it was going so well that we decided to go to do 2 trips a year. And so 10 years later now, I'm just back. I was down there in March with customers cycling and doing yoga in the sunshine. It was gorgeous.
That's so cool. I love it. And I love, excuse me, I love the fact that I was just doing something, I was just doing a post earlier actually today about the whole thing of career and stuff like that. And there's this sort of like, there's this, I can get quite a sort of annoyed about this like concept or idea that purpose and passion will just flow into you, and you'll just know exactly what you need to do, and I'll find that and I'll do that. And it's kind of like there's almost, to me, there's an element of practicality in the sense of like if you go sort of wind it back in a sense of that, just always been interested in cycling, and then getting to a point where you know you then join the club. I'm sure when you first joined that club as a social aspect, you never had the envision or the vision that at some point then you'd be doing 10 years worth of cycling tours and things like that. So I love the organicness of it, that it became something that you could make an income from, and an income stream as part of your business. So it's allowing things to happen as opposed to trying to pin your hat on something. Do you know what I mean? It's a really great way of an example of things will just
No,
happen if you allow them to.
yeah, and it just was a very natural progression as well,
Mm.
and now, because I'm getting older, I'm kind of like, it is getting harder, that trip, but I do have guides down there and all the rest, so I don't actually physically have to do as much cycling as I used to. And now actually as well, because I've sort of moved into more of a sort of the menopause women area, just that's the age bracket I'm in. I've set up more. I've set up more trips, but there's no cycling. We just go on like mini breaks, and we have beach yoga and activities and catamarans and boat trips and cocktails, and so there's a whole lovely area there as well that my business has just developed purely because I've moved into that bracket myself, and I realized that these kind of trips don't exist. And actually as well, I've got a lovely following now with sort of widows who basically have been through the grieving process, and now they're ready to get back out there, but they're kind of like, I'm the odd one out, all my friends are still married. I don't want to go out and sit for meals with couples. What can I do? And I'm like, hey, join us over here, like, a bunch of single women, let's go. you know so again, that just kind of naturally happened as well, and it's all just, yeah, everything just keeps, like, my snowball is rolling, and it just keeps getting bigger
Yeah,
and bigger and better, and more people are jumping on board, and
yeah,
it's just a lovely
yeah.
thing, because I know I'm making a difference in a nice way to people, and
Mm.
it's not, um it's kind of ethical, it's nice because you're helping them to feel better about themselves, because I never felt good about myself growing up, and I wish I could get those years back, but I can't. But
Mm.
maybe I can, like, redeem my soul by helping other people to feel nice about themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, no, very, very cool. Because it perfectly brought us into the whole, as well, the things is like that you said, one of those things you said going back to, I think you said in when '05, you said one of the things I'm not going to do is work for anyone again. You had that, we're in that sort of the rat race, as you referred it to and stuff. So, and it seems obviously now that your life in sort of working for yourself, a business, which is fantastic, has evolved and changed, and you're still changing with whatever your life and times and the various customers you work with. After being sort of working for yourself for
Yeah.
those number of years, what was go back, what was the first iteration of your own sort of business?
Well, when I came back from the cruise ships, and then I went to India and became, like, got my yoga teacher training and all that. So actually, when I came back, I was doing a lot of freelancing. I was teaching yoga and Pilates in sort of, at the time the gyms were still very busy. It was pre 2008. It was sort of 2000. Actually, it was 2007 into 2008, and it was all very, the thing to do was to do Pilates, here in South County Dublin, and
Yeah.
then the crash came, 2008. I was like, but I didn't have any customers anyway, so it didn't really matter to me. It was like I was trying to start my business anyway. But and I still am as well, a physical therapist. So I had that as well. But but now I'm sort of doing less and less of that. I've moved more into mental health because that's really where I'm interested in, and trauma in the body and just how trauma affects us, physically as well as mentally. And really my big passion is the traveling and the helping people. And that's where my heart and soul is: events, workshops. Because I used to work, before 2005. I was I was working in bars and restaurants and nightclubs. That was sort of, I had slipped into that as a young
Yep.
one, and just kept getting promoted and just stayed there. And I hated it. It was long hours. It was crap. People around me constantly drunk. A lot of drugs in Ireland at that time. Well, still is, but I just was around the drugs. I was eating rubbish. I was drinking heavily, and I was miserable. And like I said, I was putting on this whole persona. So for me, even in sort of 2008, when I had no customers and my income was rubbish, I was a million times happier than I ever was. So, I was grand. Like, I was grand. I have a spare room. I rented at the spare room. Look, you'll get around it. There's far too much emphasis put on money. Now, don't get me wrong. We all need to pay our bills, and we all need a roof over our head, and we all need to have, you know, money for food. But this whole thing of being a billionaire or being a gazillionaire or being it's like, when is enough enough?
Yeah.
Like, like, I know I'm enough. I'm happy in myself, and that's the most important thing. Everything else is just icing on the cake. And I live within my means, and people are always saying, how do you afford these trips? And I'm like, because I live within my means. My fridge is full of like normal stuff. I'm not sitting here eating caviar. I'm not buying handbags. I'm not a consumer, because it's rubbish. I don't need it. I want to go on trips. And even when I go on my trips, I will do them the cheapest I can, and I will put my money into experiences, and that's how I do it.
It's absolutely, and it shows. It comes back to that thing again of what we value, and the whole essence of this idea of the show, a sense of what's important, in a sense of you're putting your, as you say, the travel, the experience, what you want your life, the people that you want to serve, the customers, they're the importance. With some people, the value of money is more important, or status, or whatever, and it's like, but as you say, when is enough enough? And is it that sort of, there was a few years ago when in the example that got for myself, the house we now, and myself and my wife in Mullingar, and we did some renovations to it, and there was a lot of renovations, walls coming down, walls going up, and we had the bit of money and that for it, and it was like there was going to be a bit of money to spend on it and all this sort of stuff, and I was like, well, we could do this and live in the house we really want to, or we could stare at the money in the bank account. Do you know what I mean? That's that, but if we do this, we have the house that we're going to probably live in for the next 25, 30 odd years, and we'll be fine. Or we can just keep being sort of a little bit, not miserable, but sort of not quite happy with, you know what I mean? It's like the experience then of yourself, your travel, the experience of me living in the house that I want to, that's the joy. It's not looking at the numbers on a screen, because that's essentially what it would be.
Yeah, no, exactly. And being happy in your environment is detrimental to your health as well. I mean, just coming home to your little corner in the planet, like, just to your little shelter, and I'm the same, because I'm planning this year now, just giving the place a lick of paint, and again, just budgeting for it, and and it's just lovely. I want to come home to a beautiful home, because that's what I
Yeah.
deserve. And and that's again comes back to my self-love. I deserve. And I'm not going to live in a tatty house. That's not me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was going to say that as well. It's like when it coming back to the answer of when I first asked the question, that whole thing of self-love, and it's that thing, as you say, what you deserve and what you're worth. And what we mean by said worth, it's not necessarily, people think that is that there's a monetary amount, and when we say about self-worth, where it's can be a lot more deeper than that. It can be, and there is again, there's that argument of value of people who may be going for careers that it's not to say that you shouldn't go for that sort of, if you're looking for that level of return on income and things like that, that's fine. But as you say, there'll be a point where it's like, well, actually, I think there's always an argument of what are you giving up for that exchange in finance sometimes, and is that detriment to your actual worth of who you are? There was always a tipping point in all these things, and there's a point where you don't need more, you just need to figure out something else within you.
Sorry, James, I lost you there for a little while, but I'm not sure if there was a question in there, was there?
No.
Apologies.
So it's just, again, no, it's just, again, it's that sort of understanding that someone's self-worth is more than just monetary. Do you know what I mean? It's more than just the funds. It's who you are. The other question I wanted to ask you about the sort of the self-love and the sort of the loving self, because it came up with another conversation I had with someone, that term of loving yourself can previously have a negative notion or connotation to it. Someone who loves themselves can almost seen as a negative, because gives you the sort of, are they big-headed or they're arrogant. I'd love to know your sort of perspective on that, because it's completely not that. So I'd love to know what you think of that perspective.
Yeah, so and it's funny because before 2005, people would be talking about self-love and all this, and I used to think they were bonkers. Like, what are you talking about? And I always remember asking an ex-boyfriend, do you love yourself? Like, do you understand the self-love? And he was going, and I was like, but like, what is it? And I remember sort of walking around the house going, like, what is this? What is everybody talking about? And now I understand what it is. And my definition of self-love is being able to spend quality time on your own and enjoy it, and just to always be your own best friend. That is self-love. And and around all of that comes healthy boundaries, perimeters, treating yourself well, and self-care. But eating well is self-care, self-love, showing yourself kindness, showing yourself compassion, forgiving yourself. That's all part of self-love. Self-love, I think when people hear it first, they think of a very narcissistic, egotistical, kind of crazy person. But actually, it's the inside job. It's the inside out. Yeah, that's the way it is.
100%. Thanks for that. Yeah. We come to the point that I really like in the show, which I always like to ask my guests, is I'm really kind of fascinated. I find quotes or phrases can be quite powerful. So are there any quotes and phrases that are important to you?
There is one, actually. And again, it was something that really hit home the first time I heard it. And it's a quote from Atticus. And let me get this right. It says, never go in search of love, go in search of life, and life will show you the love you need.
Now that's cool.
It's lovely, isn't it?
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah,
because
it's a really great. I used to have it as my saver.
Yeah.
Never go in search of love, go in search of life, and life the love you need. Yeah,
brilliant. Because it's like, it's that what I love about when I hear sort of, and I haven't heard that one before, when I do hear different phrases or quotes, it's the application of them. It's the sort of what actually, because it's that thing of just, you say, it's almost that thing of, it's the other cliche in the sense of, what was it, that, watch pot never boils, or whatever it is. It's like, if you're trying so hard and focusing on one thing, and sometimes it's like, maybe like, if you just do something, it'll come its way. If you actually just allow things, like the things you've spoken about before, things of that more organicness, that sort of just allowing life to happen, and things will come up. It's really lovely. The next question I'd like to ask you is, who have been the biggest influences in your life?
Well, Jane Fonda was inadvertently a huge influence, and I've given her credit in my book. I'd love to just if I could get her address, if anyone knows her address, send her a copy of the book and thank her. So she was a big influence. I just loved her energy, and I used to, like, we had a VHS recorder, and you'd have the VHS, and I'd be up in my bedroom doing her aerobics, pretending to study so, with
Love
my
it.
leg warmers. So she was a big influence on my life. My father was traveling. I mean, he, you know, even to this day, he's still alive and well, but yeah, he's travel mad. So yeah, he really, he was the one who got the travel bug in me. And we're still always looking at maps and atlases together and things like that. And he also, again, we'd always be watching sort of, because he's a farmer, we'd be watching sort of nature programs and documentaries, and David Attenborough and all of that kind of stuff. So kind of gave me my love of animals and the natural world as well. um and then, actually, again, I've given her a big mention in the book. When I went on the cruise ships, I made a really great pal, and we're still in touch a lot. Lynn, she's in Florida. And she was the one who, when I went on the cruise ships, because I was sort of just straight out of sort of St. Pat's, and I was really trying to change, and I confided in her. And she was like, "Oh, I have the perfect book. You need to read this." And then she gave me a library, and then so she was always there checking in on me, and she was very much a mentor in the early days. And then now we ring up each other, and we have brilliant conversations about everything and anything, life, love, everything.
Love it.
Yeah, careers and everything.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Thanks. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Sinead, it's been absolutely fascinating to talk to you, and I've loved hearing just a little bit of your story. I do have one more question for you before I let you go, and that is, what's important for your future?
What's important for my future is what's important for my future, is remaining, like, I want to remain positive. Like, I mean, listen, don't get me wrong, we're not all like, oh, hey, but I mean, I guess, I'm very lucky now. I recognize the signs when I'm going downhill, so I'm aware of that, and I can pull myself straight out of it, or have my what you call them, sorry, my head has gone there, the way you have like techniques or whatever, and so
Yeah.
you kind of know
Yeah.
what you need to do. But I guess what's important for me is to still travel,
Yeah.
and what I'm doing is I'm doing all the crazy long haul stuff now while I can. And then, it's funny, I was talking to somebody yesterday about the States, and I actually said, I'm going to leave the States for when I'm older, because it's English speaking and it's easier to travel. I'm kind of going to doing all my South Americas and all that kind of stuff now while I can. So travel is my passport. That's the most important thing in the world
Yeah.
to me.
Love it. Absolutely. I'll have to ask you now, have you, because this is probably my wife's bucket list place is Machu Picchu. Have you been to Machu Picchu yet?
I have bine to Machu Picchu.
Ah,
Yeah, it was lovely. And I didn't do the 4 day trek because, you know, I'm very fit and very active here. So sometimes when I go abroad, I don't actually want to do, 4 day
yep.
treks. But I did the 1 day trek, which is the last. So you get the train most of the way up, and then you jump off the train, and then you actually do the last leg of the
Mm.
Inca Trail, and got to the Sun Gate, and unfortunately it was lashing rain, and I didn't see Machu Picchu till the next day, till we went
Oh
back up. But
gosh.
it was lovely, well worth the visit.
Yeah. Very
Gorgeous,
cool. Very cool.
gorgeous. Yeah, yeah.
Lovely.
And actually, the train
Fabulous.
is run by the Orient Express.
Very cool. Yeah, Sinead, as I said, it's
Yeah.
been absolutely wonderful to chat to you, and I do thank you for coming on. I want to make sure that people know how to connect and follow you and follow your story and learn more about you. We will make sure your links are in the show notes, but if you want to give a shout out now where people can connect and follow online.
So, the best thing is just to go to my website, which is SineadKennedy.com. And up in the right-hand corner are all the social media links. And there's also the shop as well there, where you can get my book as well. It is in quite a lot of shops around Dublin, but not nationwide. So you can order it directly from the website and with worldwide delivery as well. You can get it on Amazon and Kindle as well. Okay.
Awesome stuff. Fantastic. And all of those links, all the website links will be in the show notes. So yeah, thanks again, Sinead. Thanks so much for joining me today.
You're very welcome. It was great to talk.
Thanks. Thank you for watching or listening to this episode. I really hope you enjoyed the conversation. To support the show, please subscribe on your favorite platform, share your favorite episode, get involved with your comments, and give the show a rating. If you want to learn more about what I do, you can follow me at James Dean Coaching on Facebook and Instagram, connect with me on LinkedIn, or check out my website, 𝙤𝙤𝙣𝙆𝙤𝙣𝙆𝙤𝙣𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆𝙆